if you ever have reason to doubt that they're wise, just remember this lectureship that they put the lesson on patience and self-control right before lunchtime. So our elders know what they're doing. We can have confidence in that. It's a good thing to have patience and self-control. There was a hot new gadget, some technology item, this or Android, whatever. There was this technology item that was just released, and there was a long line outside the store. They were waiting in line before the store opened, before the sun was even up. Long line. They were waiting patiently until one person came and tried to squeeze by ahead of the line. So, it didn't work out because someone halfway down the line grabbed him, pushed him all the way to the back, shoved him to the ground, said, "Hey, no cutting." That's fair enough. The guy got what he deserved. But the guy didn't give up. He got up. He got a little bit further the second time, but they caught him again, grabbed him, pushed him to the back of the line, threw him on the ground. No cutting. We've been waiting here for hours. What do you think we are, stupid? So the guy said, "Fine, then I'm not going to open the store." We're talking about patience and self-control this morning. Unlike many other passages that have a lot of context that we could explore and really dive deep into, Paul here's patience and self-control, or long-suffering, and what's the other one? What's the old-timey version of the other one? Long-suffering and temperance. That's the one. Same words, just depending on how old you are, what words you use. So long-suffering and self-control, patience, temperance, all of these sorts of things. Okay, so Paul is listing these words just right in the middle of a long list of other words. Each one of which could be, as we see this morning, a sermon all on its own regard. So there isn't much by way of immediate context here. So we're going to very quickly look at what these words mean, but then we're going to spend the bulk of our time this morning exploring how we can implement these things in our lives. I want us to be able to go home this afternoon after we've had a great lunch and learned a little bit more about the fruits of the Spirit, but I want us to be able to go home knowing I can do this differently and be a better Christian. I can do this differently or better and be more Christ-like. That's my goal this morning. Let's see how well it works out. So, defining our terms, bear with me. What is patience and self-control? These are two beautiful words. I'm not often moved by reading the dictionary, like an aardvark is this kind of animal, whatever. Okay, fine. But patience and long-suffering and self-control. Patience and self-control, these are two beautiful words. I kind of got goosebumps as I was reading these. Here, long-suffering or patience. Ask yourself if this describes you, patience. Slowness in avenging wrongs. Bravely enduring in misfortunes and troubles. Bearing the offenses and injuries of others. If you are someone who is a long-suffering, then that ought to describe you. How about self-control? The virtue of one who masters his desires and passions. And the second one was especially good. A man who is not swerved from his deliberate purpose in loyalty to faith, even by the greatest trials and sufferings. That is amazing. That's not just a definition. That's something to write on your wall. This is long-suffering. This is patience. This is self-control. There is, as we explore these definitions, there is something I think that's relatively interesting here. There's some spicy little nuggets that God is implying here. Think it through with me. Okay. If God says that we should be slow in avenging wrongs done to us, and that we should master our desires and passions, the implication then is he's going to give us opportunities to practice that, right? In other words, he is promising us situations in our lives where we will be wronged or we will have some desire that we very badly want to act upon. And God says, I'm going to ask you not to do that. God is promising us, you will be wronged in your life, and I'm going to ask you not to do the thing that you very badly want to do. In order to be Christ-like, we have to do the opposite. If God says that we should bravely endure misfortunes and troubles, that we should not be swerved from our deliberate purpose in loyalty to faith, what is he by implication promising us? that we're going to have misfortunes in our lives. If not us, maybe you're the lucky exception. At the very least, people that you know. People that you know. You will encounter misfortunes so serious, perhaps, that it would shake your faith. Perhaps your faith in God, perhaps your faith in humanity, perhaps your faith in yourself, that you despair even to continue living. But He expects us to endure. That's kind of depressing news, I think. God's saying, hey guys, I want you to have these attributes, and by the way, I'm going to give you a chance to practice them. That's a little bit depressing, but there is a bright spot. God is not cruel, because Paul writes earlier that in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, in verse 3, he says that God is the Father of mercies and God of all comfort. So there's this balance. He will never expect us to do something that we're incapable of doing or send us on journeys without the help that we need to get there safely. We can always swerve off the path that He's set for us if we want to, of course. He will respect our free will. But He will not make it so that is this fatalistic, we're doomed to fail type of situation. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 13 says, no temptation 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 13, no temptation has overtaken you, except such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you're able. But with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. That you may be able to bear it. That way of escape might be others who have gone through the same difficult thing that you're going through and made it through on the other side. And they're available to give us counsel, as 2 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 4 says. It might be encouragement from His word, as Acts chapter 15 and verse 31 says. Or from the church, Galatians chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. Or failing all of these things, maybe in this life you receive no encouragement whatsoever. At the very least, Colossians chapter 1, verse 3 through 5, we do have the hope of heaven awaiting us if we remain faithful, if we have patience, if we're able to suffer long, if we're able to control ourselves and have that temperance. Whatever the means of aid, though, God does promise to give us the tools that we can successfully navigate the trials and tribulations of our lives as we develop patience and self-control. Let's start practically with the last thing first. How important is self-control? How important is this? The context of the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians chapter 5, towards the end, right before that is the works of the flesh. So Galatians chapter 5, 19-21 lists a lot of bad vices. Hey guys, here's some bad things to do. Then there's a couple of verses, 22 and 23. These set of virtues are listed, and interestingly, self-control is the last of all. Love was first, I think, for a very good reason. Self-control is last, I think, for an equally good reason. If you think about it, every one of the works of the flesh can be halted and avoided entirely for the rest of your life if you merely have self-control. Adultery and sexual immorality. Yes, you could wish that other people wouldn't dress immodestly or act in ways that would tempt you towards sexual immorality, but that kind of thinking is other control. Other control. But if you have self-control, if you choose to look away, if you do not let your thoughts linger where they ought not to linger, it matters little what other people do. If you can have self-control. Envy and jealousy. Others may flaunt their fantastic vacations or their wealth, or despite how hard you work, you don't have those same things. It could drive you to outbursts of wrath, right? But if you have self-control, you don't have to worry about controlling what other people do or talk about or drive or where they go on vacations. None of these works of the flesh will overcome you. Same with murder, drunkenness, revelries, the rest. They all stem from a lack of self-control, a giving in to emotion rather than following your reason. Emotion is a good thing in its place. If we allow our passions and emotions to lead us, then we have no way to control ourselves. And it goes hand in hand with patience. I want to ask an interesting question. What causes impatience? What causes impatience? Impatience, I would like to submit, is the result of having a goal. So imagine you have a goal, X, whatever it is, and being unable to accomplish that goal fast enough. In other words, frustration, right? Put more simply, impatience is a dissatisfaction with reality, a dissatisfaction with where you are or how things are right now, combined with a desire for control. Dissatisfaction with reality combined with a desire for control causes impatience. That is the root cause, or at least one of them. Now, let me quickly say there's nothing necessarily wrong with being dissatisfied with reality, with wanting to change things. Dissatisfaction with reality can motivate us to do good in this world and to change it. If we see something that ought not to be, it's a good thing to see it as a situation that needs fixing. If we were okay with terrible things happening, then are we really Christians? Are we really living and acting in a Christ-like manner? So the dissatisfaction with reality is not necessarily a bad thing. The problem comes when it causes us to have an inordinate desire for control, specifically the ability to control others. The Bible talks frequently about self-control, but never about other control. God doesn't even exercise other control. Self-control is a virtue. The desire for other control is a vice. Imagine you're driving to work and you're stuck in a traffic jam. It's happened to all of us before. You have a goal. I want to get to work and don't be late. But there's something in your way, namely all these bad drivers who are rubbernecking and they're cutting you off. They don't know how to drive. And where do they even get their driver's license? Blah, blah, blah. You know the drill. If they would just drive better and stop doing the things that they're not supposed to be doing, then, I wouldn't be late for work, right? Or if you're the parent to a young toddler, we have some parents here, or some people who have been parents to young toddlers. We know that toddlers like to scream. You might have the goal of, I would like to have a peaceful dinner. But the toddlers have goals of chaos. Or if you want to study the Bible with someone, but they don't want to, or maybe they will study with you, but they refuse to think logically. God is love. He just wants me to be happy. Well, he is love. He would like you to be happy ultimately, but the way people say that a lot of times is in an illogical manner. So what's the solution then? So these are all situations that could lead us easily to losing our patience. Let's talk about solutions now. Some people may be disciplined enough to just will themselves to be more patient. Oh, the Bible says, be patient. I will myself. Now I'm patient. I'll never lose my patience again because I know that's what God expects of me. If that's you, great. But for the rest of us, I've got some suggestions from the Bible. Here's some things we can consider. First, we can plan better. We can, honestly, a lot of our impatience just stems from us not being very good planners sometimes. We might lose our patience simply because we didn't plan well enough, and the good news, this one is relatively easy to fix. If you know it takes you 20 minutes to get to work, or get to worship, or get to wherever you need to get to, don't leave 20 minutes before you need to be there. Or 15 minutes before you need to be there and hope that you don't hit any red lights. Because you're going to hit the moment that it's most important that you not be late, you're going to hit the extra red light that is normally green. Or there's going to be a small fender bender or something silly is going to happen, and it's going to be a lot harder to act in a Christian manner. But if you leave 30 minutes earlier, if there's a red light, it's no big deal. I planned for this. I expected there to be a red light. And if it's green instead of red, now instead of being impatient, now you're happy. Wow, what a blessing. I didn't expect or deserve this. My day's just gotten better. All right. We can plan better. It's a lot easier to be patient if you have a little bit of padding to work with. You can't stop to be selfless and help your kids put their shoes on in the morning if you're running late, which just so happens my family was this morning, and my daughter couldn't find her shoes. And I knew I was about to preach on this, so you know what I did? I was patient. I was patient. So it's good. Preachers learn most from their own sermons. It's hard if you are running late. It is that much more difficult to stop and help your toddler put on their shoes. So what do? You throw them in the car barefoot and you sort it out later, right? It is hard, but again, if you wake up a bit early, if you plan ahead, leave earlier than you need to, if there is a minor setback, you can keep it in context. This is a minor setback. We have time to work with this. It's far easier to be patient and respond kindly to these kinds of delays. Next, let's make the best use of time. Sometimes there is nothing we can do to make this situation better. There's no amount of early that we can be to deal with the situation that is coming up. Maybe your drive to work is just 2 hours each way, even without traffic. No amount of planning is going to fix that. Sometimes you just have to wait in the doctor's office for 8 hours, it seems. You know, they call patients, like in the doctor's office. They don't call them, hurry, or they call them patients for a reason, because you got to wait for the doctor, right? Sometimes you just have to wait, and there's nothing you can do about it. But you can redeem the time. You can make the best use of the time. You can bring your Bible and read your Bible. If you're in the car, you can listen to the audio Bible. You can listen to something encouraging on the radio. Maybe avoid the news. That's just going to stress you out. How often do they report on good news? Rarely. They will report on all the things that you don't like happening, though, and you'll arrive all stressed out. We can redeem the time. We can make the best use of the time. Jeff is a great example. I don't know if he still does it, at least he used to. He used to have his laptop in the car plugged into the cigarette lighter, and he would listen to, not watch because he was driving, he would listen to Bible DVDs and tapes, sermons, and all sorts of things. And I would ask, Jeff, how do you have time to learn all these things? Well, he so happens to have, I think, a 1 or 2 hour drive to work. So he's 2 or 3 or 4 hours every day free, where he can just learn things about the Bible. He's redeeming the time. Others of us would listen to pop music or just grumble or whatever. We can make the best use of this time. We can make the best use of it. If we're making good use of the time, we arrive before we even realize we were becoming impatient. Number 3, we can adjust our expectations. We can adjust our expectations with relationships. If you're single and don't particularly want to be, some people don't mind, it can be especially difficult to be patient as you search for a spouse. Unfortunately, movies and books and such have trained us to expect certain things. Mr. Perfect, Mrs. Perfect, or Miss Perfect, I guess. We might need to adjust our expectations. Be wise, of course, because who you choose to marry, who you choose to date, will have a greater impact on your spiritual health than possibly anything else in this world. But sometimes we can have unrealistic expectations. Someone once said, if you're waiting for the perfect spouse, when you find them, what makes you think they will want you? Well, yeah. Well, none of us are perfect, are we? If you find a perfect person, okay. We all have our flaws, and the great thing about marriage is that we can use it to help make each other better. I know a number of people who are happily married for years and years and years who didn't like each other very much the first time they met. Just throwing it out there. Okay, in the family, we parents are expected to exert a certain level of control over our young children, to teach them to not be barbarians. But we are not expected to have complete control, okay? Forgetting that children are their own people, whether they're young or whether they're taller than you, we are to be their guides and point the way, not their taskmasters cracking the whip and demanding robotic obedience. If that is our expectation, we may be setting the bar too high for ourselves and setting them up, as well as ourselves, for frustration and impatience. Whether you have kids or not, expectations have a lot to do with how patient we are able to be in life in general. Is our cashier at the grocery store going slower than all the other lines? Because that's what happens. You get in one line because you're smart. You pick the shortest line. You know, you've been around, right? You pick the shortest line expecting to get out, but then the 2 long lines that were next to you, they're the guys who came in after you, they're already leaving the store, and you're stuck in line because it ran out of tape, of course. And then someone's writing a check, and then there's, he brings out the coupons, and then, no, this coupon was for this other thing, and it's fine because you weren't in a hurry anyway, as you're gripping your shopping cart. If you had the expectation of getting through this line quickly, you might become frustrated and begin to think thoughts that you ought not to think. You might begin to act in an unchristian manner. But if you had the expectation of getting through the line eventually, then if there is a setback, if your cashier is a trainee, That's fine. In my family growing up, my dad had what we called the Diaz Curse. The Diaz Curse. You remember that, Mom? Whatever line we got in, immediately ran out of receipt tape. The person would go on break, or someone would have a bucket full of pennies or something. And I don't remember my dad ever losing his patience, because he would laugh and say, it's the Diaz Curse. And we would have a good time about it. We merely reframed the situation that others might lose their patience in. We reframed it and said, this is funny. We're going to enjoy this. We get to choose how we respond to difficulties in our lives. We do. We don't get to choose our difficulties, but we do get to choose how we respond to them. So, expectations. We can adjust our expectations. Lack of empathy. This is a good one. While working on this lesson, I actually found myself behind a car that had a bumper sticker. It said, please be patient, and then in big, bold words, you know what's below, student driver. I don't know if you remember how hard it was to learn how to drive. For me, it was nerve-wracking. And if some impatient person started honking at me and giving me a hard time, it would have made a difficult thing that much more difficult. I remember my dad teaching me how to drive stick shift, and we lived in North Carolina, and there were hills, and there was a red light at the top of a hill, and I stalled that car out for the entire green light, and there was a car behind us, and I don't remember the car honking a single time, and I very greatly appreciated it. My dad didn't want to test his patience, though, so when the light turned red again, we got out and we switched, and then he did it. But I very much appreciate him having patience with me as I was learning. We have to have patience with new Christians, with people who are not Christians, with people who were born and raised as something else, and they're not doing everything immediately the right way. We have to have patience with ourselves if we don't do perfectly. God does. God does. It's far easier to be patient, but not only that, but understanding and kind and helpful and encouraging if we have empathy. Or as Hebrews 10:24 says, if we consider one another. People are going through a lot of things. If you're ignored one day, it may not be because they hate you. It may be because the other person's going through some stuff. It's hard being a child and growing up. I frequently hear from older folks how glad they are that they're not that they grew up when they did and not now with all the things going on today. It's hard being older. Things just hurt the older we get. The world makes less and less sense as it changes from how it was when we were younger. It's hard being a parent, tired all day, up to your elbows in diapers and wipes and tantrums. It's hard being married. It's hard being single. It's just hard being sometimes, isn't it? I may have no idea what you're going through, and you may have no idea what I'm going through, but giving a bit of grace and having patience, the benefit of the doubt, can go a long way in being able to control your thoughts and emotions. Patience as an excuse, though, it can sometimes be an excuse. They say a safety net can sometimes become a hammock. In spiritual matters, there seem to be two risks, one on either side of patience. We might be tempted to use patience as an excuse not to do the hard things that we know we ought to do. We ought to take care that patience does not morph into procrastination. We ought to take care that that doesn't happen. I came across a definition of procrastination recently that really made me stop and think, because I consider myself an A-plus procrastinator. But this definition, it made me think hard about it. This is it. Procrastination is the arrogant assumption that God owes you another opportunity to do what you already had time to do. Procrastination is the arrogant assumption that God owes you another opportunity to do what you already had time to do. I'll ask this person to study the Bible with me later. I shouldn't bother correcting that brother or sister. I'll just have patience instead. Sometimes that is the right course, but sometimes it can be an excuse. Virtue can quickly turn into vice if we use it as an excuse. On the other hand, so that was one side, I don't know that most of us likely fall into that bucket. Most of us perhaps might fall into the other bucket where the risk is We put too much pressure on ourselves or others to change right now. Have you ever learned something and then you expect everybody else to know it immediately? Remember that not even Jesus converted everyone he came across. The better route sometimes is to have patience with him. He let the rich young ruler walk away from him because he loved him. We should shine our lights the best we can while remembering that we still must allow others to come to their own decisions. That responsibility falls on them. It is not our job to control what they do or what they believe. We have to trust that God will provide those with good and honest hearts ample opportunity to do what he wants them to do, to obey his gospel. He wants your loved ones to be saved far more than you want them to be saved. Remember that. Self-control is a virtue. Other control is a vice. As we wrap up here before lunch, in the grand scheme of things, as Christians, we can think bigger, far bigger than anyone else. If you're stuck on an airplane, this is just, a specific example. Don't ask me where this came from. Imagine you're stuck on an airplane waiting to take off for 3 hours, and it's hot on the airplane, and there's no snacks, and everyone around you is grumbling. How can you as a Christian change your thinking so that being patient and having self-control isn't overwhelming? Well, I would submit to you that if we think bigger, it can help as well. No matter how bad things in this life gets, we're doing far better still than any of us deserve. No matter how hot the airplane gets, hell is hotter. We're lucky to live in a time where we can fly across the country or across the world in a matter of hours rather than days or weeks or months. Or long ago, if you sailed across the ocean, you will never see the people on the other side of the ocean for the rest of your life. It was goodbye forever. Even with all of life's inconveniences, setbacks, frustrations, calamities, in the grand scheme of things, our lives here on earth are but a vapor. When we back up and take the longer view that our God loves us, that we are saved, that we have a home in heaven with him, then so what? So what? All of the daily frustrations and reasons to lose control, to be frustrated, impatient, sort of just fade away in the background because we have hope. We have hope. So if you would like to have better self-control, if you would like to have better patience, try these things. Plan better. Accept what you can't change and make the best use of the time. Adjust your expectations. Have empathy. And finally this morning, let's think bigger from time to time as well. Thank you.